Hi there, and welcome to the Skylight Books author reading series. If you'd like to learn more about us and our many upcoming author events, please visit skylightbooks.com, where you can browse our inventory, buy books, and join our Friends with Benefits Club. You can also follow us on Twitter, Tumblr, and Facebook. To speak to a real live bookseller like me, please call 323-660-1175. Thanks for your support, and enjoy.
Spanning 2 continents, Black Wings is the story of Laila and Yasmeen, a mother and daughter struggling to meet across the generations, cultures, and secrets that separate them. Their shared grief, as well as the common bond of unhappiness in their marriages, allows them to reconnect after 17 years of frustration, anger, and misunderstandings. Sehba Sarwar creates essays, stories, poems, and art that tackle displacement, migration, and women's issues. Her writings have appeared in publications including New York Times Sunday Magazine, Asia Magazine of Asian Literature, Callaloo, and elsewhere. Her novel, Black Wings, was first published in 2004 by Alhamra Publishing, Pakistan. Born and raised in Karachi, Pakistan, in a home filled with artists and activists, Sarwar is currently based in Southern California, where she lives with her husband and daughter. Alicia Fogel-Sines is a native of Los Angeles, daughter of immigrants, a poet, a meditation instructor, and a senior museum educator at LACMA, where she coordinates family programs and leads meditation and art experiences. And last but not least, also joining us is Neela Banerjee, managing editor of Kaya Press. She teaches writing in the Asian American Studies Department at UCLA. Her writing has appeared in Prairie Schooner, Pank Magazine, Chicago Quarterly Review, and many other places. We are incredibly fortunate to have them with us this evening. Please join me in giving them a warm welcome.
Let's see. All right. So I welcome everyone, and Sehba asked me to do what I'm calling the girlfriend welcome. So you got all the deets and the wonderful accomplishments that are on paper, but I'm here to, first of all, welcome Sehba to Los Angeles. It's been a couple years after, 20 years plus in Houston, where she did amazing work as a writer and as an activist, and had started, and I apologize for reading off of my phone because I feel very millennial doing this, and I'm way older than millennials. So, so she founded this amazing arts and literary organization called Voices Breaking Boundaries, and this organization focused on awareness and dialogue about social justice issues. The way that I met Sehba here is that we were both part of the Macondo Writers Workshop, and that workshop was founded by Sandra Cisneros, and it's a place where writers get together during the summer and workshop. Not every summer, not every writer who's part of it is part of that, but once you're part of it, you have a sister and brotherhood that you meet in other places, what we would call an hermandad. And Sehba and I, as soon as we met, a year and a half ago? Is it already 2? I can't remember. Anyway, something like that. We had an instant bond. Maybe it's from that moving around in different places, having lived in other countries, but we also live close to each other, which is wonderful in Los Angeles. So we've been able to connect, and her warmth and her writing and having another writing buddy is amazing. Also, let's see, I think, sorry, I'm going to, well, anyway, I wanted to welcome Sehba here. Other things I wrote down were things that were already said. So, but what I wanted to do was just really have this, that you'll, after having read a lot of Sehba's work over the last year or so, that I think that you're in for an incredible treat to listen to her and also to dialogue. And she's a deep thinker, but also very warm and kind. And I'm so happy to have, I think that Los Angeles is lucky and Houston is less lucky to not have you anymore. So come on up. And thank you.
You want to come up? Or I can read. Okay. So I'll just go ahead and begin reading. A lot of people are always, when you write something, people are always like, so what is this book about? And my standard response is now witches. And it's true. Because, and it's not witches as in Salem. It's witches, it's about what happens to women, how women get tagged. When we break the rules, when we do something different, we become tagged as evil, doing something wrong. And so it focuses on the myth of women, but there's a backstory about myths in Black Wings, which is really the cover, which is the title, Black Wings. And it's a metaphor for women and women's lives and women's stories. And when I was growing up in Karachi, Pakistan, we were told a lot of stories, and there were things we were afraid of. And we spent a lot of summers in northern Pakistan, which is very mysterious. And in some ways, when it's rainy and cloudy in Los Angeles, I'm totally back in that space, Nathia Gali. And in the novel, I change it to Hawa Gali. I change the title of the space. But the novel moves from Houston to Karachi to the northern corners of Pakistan. And it focuses on it opens with the life of Laila, of Yasmeen, who is living in Houston. She's angry with her mother, Laila. She's cut off from her family. She's been living in Houston. She blames her mother for the death of her twin, Yasir. And she hasn't gone home being Pakistan for 18 years. And on a whim, after divorce, she invites her mother, Laila, to visit Houston. And it tears her world open. And so I'll just read a small snippet because I can always read more, and you can always read more because you have the book. And it's, as a first book, many of these stories come from my life. So this particular moment that I'm going to share from, that she is told as a story within this novel, actually happened to my sister and me. And of course, it's all changed, but anybody who knows me and my life and my family will immediately go, oh yeah, that's who, that's that person. So, and basically what happens is that when Laila arrives in Houston, she hasn't seen her grandchildren, and she starts to connect with them by telling stories. So this is one moment when Yasmeen is trapped in her office because it's raining in Houston, flooding, no surprise for anybody who's been there. And she can't get home, so Laila has to deal with her grandchildren. The electricity has gone out, and her grandchildren are just like going crazy. And of course, Laila's memories of losing her son, because he dies in Hawa Gali, are also triggered. But she begins to tell a story to calm herself down and to bring her grandchildren closer to her and to calm them down. So I won't tell the whole story because it's kind of long, but I'll just read a little bit. And this is when the power has gone out and it's all dark in their Houston house. Our mountain house was large and rambling, with veranda wooden lattices so old that they looked as if they would dissolve if we touched them. Our lawn was grassy with sprawling bushes, perfect for the hide-and-seek games that my brother, sister, and I played. In Hawa Gali, my siblings and I had to follow 2 rules. First, we weren't allowed to leave the building grounds without adults. And second, we were not allowed to talk to strangers. We were told that children would be kidnapped from the mountainside and were taken to beggar camps where their arms or legs were cut off. Others were blinded. After maiming them, the kidnappers took the children to cities and forced them to beg. The grown-ups repeated these rules to us each year, but my sister Shireen and I broke the rules during the summer that I turned 10. We had guests staying with us that summer, my cousin Babar and his parents. We didn't know them very well because they lived abroad. Babar, tall, 16, with a voice deep like a man's, was the same age as my brothers, but he rarely joined their cricket games. Instead, he kept to himself, often disappearing for hours with his air gun strapped to his shoulder as if he carried a hunting rifle. One evening, a hailstorm began, after which we were pelted by rain for a week. Temperatures dipped lower, and we spent our summer evenings huddled by the fireside. Shireen and I drew in our coloring books, while our older brothers played cards or listened to the radio. Never social, Babar skulked in his bedroom, a small section in the attic which had been closed off to create a room. One afternoon, Shireen and I played shipwreck in the open area of the attic. I leapt on a wooden chest and was about to slash Shireen's head with my pretend saber when Babar came up the stairs on his way to his room. He paused at his door. "Beware of the Kanizes," he hissed. Shireen and I dropped our weapons. "Kaniz? She's in Pindi. We were talking about our maid, Kanizbua, who was young but known for her grouchiness." Babar shrugged. "Don't you know that in Hawagali a witch is called a Kaniz? The witches here hang off trees like bats. They wear black robes." I pictured Kanizbua in her grey burqa who lived with family in Pindi, and I remembered her stern eyes and her clipped voice telling me to sit still while she pulled knots out of my hair. She never seemed to care if she hurt me. I could understand why, in the mountains, her name meant witch. Babar thrust his face close to mine, so close I could see the hair stubble on his cheek. "Kanizes don't like little girls. They swoop down and tear the earrings off your earlobes. Sometimes they enter the attic." He snorted. "You don't believe me? Wait till one gets you. You'll know she's close if you smell stinky breath or see yellow eyes." Shireen and I looked around the attic, half expecting to see a woman who looked like Kanizbua swinging off the ceiling. Babar disappeared in his bedroom, closing the door behind him. A second later, he stuck his head out of the door again. "And oh, don't go near those poisonous cobra plants. Those are evil too." He shut the door with a click. Shireen and I knew all about the cobra plants that grew along the mountainside. In early summer, cobra plants were green, but towards August, the plants grew tall and purple, their striped, long leaves ending with a thin thread that quivered like snakes' tongues past the leaves' tip. Even before Babar said anything about them, Shireen and I had avoided the plants. But after hearing his pronouncement, we promised each other never to touch a cobra plant again. And though I did not believe Babar's stories, I took off my earrings and hid them inside the chest of drawers that my sister and I shared. Well, because it's a story, of course, they're going to break the rule, and one day they're looking for a ball, and they just decide to go to the park. So I'm just going to pick up at another point. The sun sank behind pine trees and tree shadows lengthened, reminding me of warnings that we had been given about kidnappers and beggar camps. I thought of the city where throngs of beggar children pressed wet cheeks to automobile windows. Some children didn't have tongues or eyes. Others were missing legs or arms. I shivered. I remembered Babar's story about witches who looked like Kanizbua, and I was glad I wasn't wearing my earrings. When I stared at a fir tree, the trunk seemed to have transformed into a moving object who looked like Kanizbua, approaching us with her burqa flapping around her like wings. Shireen pulled at my sleeve, pointing to the mountainside where spilling, swarming, and coiling around fir tree trunks were cobra plants that seemed to have come alive. We screamed and sprinted downhill, certain that the eyes and necks of cobra plants were following us down the road, and that a Kaniz was hot on our trail. From out of the mist appeared an old man wearing a tweed hat with gray hair that sprouted in all directions. His shadow was crooked, making him look like a puppet. The man stretched his cane across our path to stop us. "Hello, girls," he said. "Is everything okay?" I grabbed Shireen's hand. "Where's your mother?" the man asked, his deep voice sounding like a growl. "Leave us alone," I stammered. His eyebrows shot up to join the tufts of hair growing beneath his cap. "You had better come with me," he said, reaching for my free hand. Shireen recovered and kicked the man's shin. We grabbed each other's hands and raced into the mist, stopping only once we were certain the man was not behind us. Our hearts pounded, our eyes bulged, and our feet hurt. "Is he gone?" Shireen asked. I swallowed, sensing danger not yet past in the moonless night, with few stars sparkling through the web of mist. Fireflies flew between us. The scent of crushed pine, mingled with mist and earth, rose to our nostrils. In the trees above, an owl hooted, and leaves rustled. A shriek belonging to neither animal nor person speared the air. Shireen's cold hands clutched my elbow. "What was that?" she quavered. I shook my head. We heard a flapping sound. Above us, a dark shadow with black wings that spanned more than 6 feet flew from tree to tree. "Run!" we screamed. Our footsteps thumped on the downhill road. We could feel rustling above us. Fear of the Canis spurred us to run faster than we had ever run before. In the distance through the fog, we sighted our house lights inviting us to safety. Rounding the corner, we passed the entrance lampposts, and our feet crunched the gravel on our driveway. Shireen pushed the door open. Once inside, she slammed it shut. A thump sounded against the door. Well, the girls are grounded, right? Their parents find out they went, and they broke the rules. They didn't get kidnapped, but they got grounded. So they had to stay home. The next day was sunny, and our entire family went to Titli Park for a picnic. But Shireen and I had to stay at home with my older aunt. We slumped in the dark stairwell, arguing over who had made the decision to leave the grounds. A deep voice spoke behind us. "Stop grumbling. First you break rules, then you fuss." I whipped my head around. "Babar, you didn't go with them?" Babar grinned, showing his wolf teeth. "Of course not. I am going to go shoot Canises." Shoot Canises? I thought of Canis Bois squatting in the open courtyard at our house, scrubbing our clothes or crushing garlic and ginger, her sleeves rolled up and her face gleaming with sweat. I felt sorry for her, but Babar gave me little time to think. He signaled for us to follow him, which we did, all the while thinking about how Babar was paying attention to us for the second time. Once in the attic, we told him about the old man and the black shadow. Babar nodded as if he already knew. "That was a Canis following you. And the man, that must have been a kidnapper. I'm glad you weren't harmed. Those cobra plants are dangerous. They wrap themselves around children's legs and trip them so the Canises can catch them." My eyes must have widened because Babar said, "Don't worry, I'm going to destroy the Canises." He locked the attic door behind us, closing the previous night's danger, and pulled open the curtains to allow speckled sunlight to enter past fir trees. Babar inserted shiny steel pellets into his gun's chamber and issued orders. "You have to be quiet. Signal to me by raising your left hand if you think we are being watched by a Canis." The windows were open without glass or bars. When I crouched close to the one he assigned me to watch, I could not stop thinking about how easily a Canis could fly inside. 10 minutes later, Shireen raised her left hand. Moving near her window, I saw a dark shadow hanging off the oak tree branch, but its cloudy shape was unclear. Babar inched closer. He rested the airgun's nozzle on the windowsill and pulled the trigger. Ping! The bullet ricocheted off a chimney. We heard a flapping and saw a shadow flying upwards. Its dark shape made me want to run downstairs and hide in my bed. Missed. Next time I'll get it. Do you know that a Canis becomes harmless when I shoot it? The witch turns into a monkey, a squirrel, or a crow. You'll see. For a long time, nothing happened. The heat knocked us into a doze. But when a shadow flew across my face, I opened my eyes. I saw a Canis flapping her wings past the oak branches. A thick smell like raw sewage filled the air. Yellow eyes pierced into mine, making my heart pound so hard that I was certain the beat could be heard at the Valley tea shop. My chest tight, I slithered close to Babar and pinched his arm. Awakening with a jolt, he saw my left hand raised. He picked up his airgun, took aim, pulled the trigger. I'll stop right there. Thank you. Thank you. That is just one little story within the story, but that is the story that actually started the novel.
Wow, awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing. That was a beautiful reading. The novel is so vibrant, so full of mystery. I think it really has so much tension that pulls us through. So y'all better get yours. Thank you so much for inviting me to be in conversation with you. So yeah, let's start with that moment. What was, how did you start this? We heard that the book originally came out in 2004. So tell us about those beginning pages.
It's been a process. And that story, actually, I began in college at Mount Holyoke in Massachusetts. Wow. Because I was an avid reader, but I didn't realize that, I could write, because in Karachi growing up, I had taken my Cambridge exams, and we always read Wordsworth, Jane Austen. I mean, we knew what Daffodils and Westminster Bridge looked like, but we never really encountered writing by brown or black writers. So in college, I began writing, and I wrote this story as a short story, and then I lost it. But when I began seriously writing after finishing my master's degree, that was the first story I wrote. And then I began writing stories, and I thought, I'll just write stories. And then I was like, I have to think of characters who are telling the stories. Mm-hmm. And then slowly, Yasmeen and Laila emerged, and then they became really important to the narrative. And there are many stories that I didn't keep. The stories I kept are only the ones that push the narrative forward.
So that's so interesting that the novel is told mostly in alternating chapters from Laila and Yasmeen's points of view. So were the stories coming out in that way, in their points of view? And did they kind of become central? How did you decide on kind of that architecture?
That's a good question, actually. I think the story, it really had to do with the dating of the story, because there's one story that Yasmeen tells about, and when I first wrote the novel, each chapter had a title. So there's a chapter called The Circus During Wartime, which is set in Karachi, 1971, when there's a war between India and Pakistan is, army is defeated within 10 days, but in the meantime, Pakistani army has been doing genocide in Bangladesh. So that story was told in Yasmeen's voice, because it had to be timed in that way, because it couldn't be Laila's, It was about a story about it's parallel, and it's the first story that she ends up telling her children about Pakistan. She's never talked to her children, but after her mother tells her children, that's the first story she tells, but it's also a story about how she and her twin, Yasir, who dies, sneak out. It's also about sneaking out, and they go to see a circus, and, well, that's another story based on a true story, but it's very magical. I mean, I am very influenced by magical realism, so that is that, because I don't think you know what's real and what's not through most of the narrative.
I mean, I think that the novel is deeply about this idea of kind of, that Yasmeen, especially, I think both Yasmeen and Laila, but Yasmeen more is dealing or has shut out this grief of her twin brother's loss. So she's has not dealt with it for 18 years. She's, soon after he passes away, moves to America for university and kind of, blocks out that pain and that trauma. And as her mother comes and is telling these stories, not to Yasmeen, but to her children, everything is starting to come back. So I think that idea, and then as we get further in the story, these stories and which stories are true and what actually happens that night that this traumatic thing happened, everything is so beautifully mixed and alluring as we get further in. But I think there's such a idea of these stories, whether they're stories of family, whether they're these mystical stories you make up of children, kind of being a real part of the healing that happens in this book. And so you just talked about, not ever having read, kind of seen yourself in books that you read kind of growing up, but why were these kind of stories so important for you to tell in this way, or why were stories important to you as an artist?
You don't have to film it. They actually filmed it. Because I don't know, my writing process is very organic. I mean, I don't think about what I'm doing. I just start, and I don't know the ending. Like when I was working on Black Wings, I did not know how it would end. The ending, I mean, there's a part of my brain that knows where it's going, where the story's going, but I'm closing doors until I'm ready to open that door. So the ending was as much a surprise to me as it will be to you as readers. So in that sense, I don't know what inspires me to write stories. They just sort of meander out.
You're talking a lot about how these stories were based in your own experiences. Did they also come from kind of family stories that you had been told, or is that a tradition in your family, or a place that you found?
Everybody told stories. Yes, everybody. You're South Asian. That's what we do. We tell stories. It's just like, sit down, it's raining. And we didn't have television. We didn't have gadgets. We didn't have, we didn't have all this.
You weren't posting to Instagram?
We were not posting to Instagram in 1971, no. So it was just like, what are you going to do? You're bored, you're thinking, you're just hanging out, and you've got your trove of cousins with you, and what are you going to do? You're going to tell stories. You're going to make up plays. You're going to perform. We did all that. So we had the narratives, and then my grandparents would tell stories, my parents would tell stories. So they were all around us. And some of the incidents that are described as stories in Black Wings are true moments in my life, but altered, considerably fictionalized, but they begin from a germ of truth. So, and I realized I didn't talk about the process of why Black Wings came out in 2004 and why it's out now. So the book was published in 2004 in Pakistan. I have an agent in New York that really loved it, and she tried to get big publishing houses to accept it, and they would not. They wanted me to make a lot of changes. They wanted me to Muslimize it. They wanted me to make it more fit into the stereotype of what Pakistani women should be. And the women that are in this narrative are not traditional. I was not raised in a traditional home, and I did not want to change my narrative. The book begins after 9/11. So that 9/11 is definitely in the manuscript, but it's not in the way that you would think it would be when you think of a Pakistani
woman. Really
woman.
interested in this. So then you were trying to sell it, I would say, in 2003, in that time?
Yeah. And I was just like, I'm not changing it. And then a Pakistani publisher wanted to take it, and I said, and her advice was just do it. So it came out in 2004, the summer of 2004, in Pakistan. I was pregnant. My daughter was born in September, and I didn't have time to pay attention to the novel. So the novel kind of went a little bit under. And then I went back to Karachi the next summer, I gave readings, and I did a tour in Pakistan, and I read in Houston, but I never really had the book come out in the US. And then last year, a friend of mine who started an independent publishing house in El Paso, Texas, she loved the book. I had gone and given a reading there, and she wanted to use it as a textbook back then in 2006. And it wasn't available in the US. So she wanted to run it, and I was like, sure. And I picked it up, and I began just looking at it again, and I ended up rewriting the whole manuscript this time for this edition. It's very different. My writing style has changed, my writing process has changed, and so I ended up chopping like 30 pages, not as chunks, but in terms of language. It's much tighter, and I love it. Not that I didn't love it then, but I really love it now.
I mean, I think that's so interesting, and that's so great to hear that you love it. More power. So I think that's really interesting. When you were writing it, when you were putting together these stories, it was after 9/11. That's kind of it's one of the events that happens in this book. It's the novel takes place pretty much in the post 9/11 time period. But it's not the defining factor of the novel by any sense. Neither are, and the fact that the identity, the ethnic identity of the characters being from Pakistan or half Pakistani, like Yasmeen's children, they play a role, but again, they don't define them. They're defined by their life, the things that happen to them. And I think that I thought about that when I was reading it, not having known the history. So I was interested in whether 9/11 was kind of a thing that happened that got you to kind of pull it all together, or was it just part of your process? And yeah.
That happened after, actually. I had the manuscript completed in 1999, and then I had some health stuff to deal with, so I put it away. And when I went back to it, it was after 9/11. So I could not, and that affected my life. It affected all of us, right? That morning, what was it, how many minutes? I mean, how can we forget what happened? So to have a book published after that moment in history, it didn't make sense not to. So that's why, and I think, and chapter 1 begins with Yasmeen driving to Houston Airport to pick up her mother, and many of us have forgotten two things. One, how easy it used to be pre-9/11 to pick up somebody at the airport. Like, you walked right up to where the plane was unloading passengers and you greeted them. That's not happening, and that wasn't happening in most parts of the world. That is true. It never happened in Pakistan. Or in India, I imagine, right? But the other thing that happened was that you couldn't park even close to the airport. You had to circle. Do you remember that? So, I mean, and there were 6 months of that. So it begins with that moment. And then immediately there's a reference to what happens to Yasmeen's daughter, Saira, who gets bullied at school, and how that's dealt with. So it just, that was, but
Right,
those were additions that I made as I was revising.
Which I think it's really powerful, and it's so important that it's there, and it's, from a South Asian point of view. And I think one of the things that stands out most to me in this novel is that these two main characters are unconventional women. This book is not about Yasmeen's divorce. It's kind of after the fact, and she has a new lover, and she's kind of exploring that. And we find out things about, Laila's own marriage, and I think that is so powerful because, it doesn't change the fact that they're deeply connected to where they are and their identities. And I think it's so unfortunate that, especially at that time, and who knows now, if that publishers kind of pushed back and wanted you to kind of shape them into people that you don't know or recognize, So I mean, what was that? It's so great that you brought it out. I mean, but was it frustrating? Did it make you want to not write fiction? Tell us a little bit about that time.
No, I don't think so. I mean, I've never written for the market. I write for myself. I write because there are stories in me that I want to share, and when I share them, I get a response. People want to hear them. So I was angry, of course. But it's something we all experience, right? People look at you. No matter where you're from, if when you're walking around and you meet somebody for the first time, you'll be asked, where are you from? If you were born somewhere else, you talk a little bit different. But no, where are you really from? And then eventually, if Pakistan is now thrown into the mixture of conversation, it's like, are you Muslim? And then what is the Muslim experience? And I was raised in an atheist home. And I am now Muslim because I am defined as that. It is just something that we have to accept, and that is what it is. But I don't want to create characters that are not my truth. I'm just not going to change that. So, too bad. I'm really happy for Vili's books, and I love independent publishing houses. I'm really honored that they wanted to do it. I just finished a tour of Portland, Seattle, Vancouver, and got a wonderful response. I'm about to go back to Texas, to Austin, Houston, San Antonio, and I'm really excited to be sharing this book out with the larger U.S. because that's what it was not. That's what did not happen the last round. So I'm okay doing it like this.
So, and I think it's so important to have books like this out that speak to the diversity of Muslim identity and South Asian identity. There's so many different things. I think one of the things that really speaks to that is of books that I've read or that I'm familiar with, that the setting of this book, especially this misty mountain side that is so crucial to these characters, their memories, and then eventually they return there. So the second half of the book is kind of, we get to be there kind of in the present time of the story, and it's such a magical place, and to see it in the memories, to see it in the through these children who've never been to Pakistan as well, I thought was really rich. But that was only one of the many settings in the book that you take deep dives into. I mean, even a short trip to San Francisco that Yasmeen takes is so rich. You know, Houston, so many places. The setting seems so important to you and to the novel, and really kind of serve as these set pieces that pull through. You know, I mean, talk a little bit. You said that you did spend a lot of time in this kind of northern Pakistan area. So, you know, was that always where you found yourself writing to? And, you know, and maybe as somebody who's lived in a lot of places, you know, why was place kind of calling you so much?
Place has been really, really important. And it's funny because when I was first writing Black Wings, I didn't want to say that Laila and Yasmeen were in Houston. I was like, this is not Houston. No, I'm not really in Houston. No, I'm not really in Houston. And eventually I was like, okay, they have to be somewhere. I will claim it, you know. So Houston is definitely very visible as a city. But the place that moves through the entire manuscript that is really important is Hawa Gali. And those of you from Pakistan, you know where am I talking about? It's not called Hawa Gali, right? What's it called? It's Natya Gali, right? Every description that I give is of this mountain. So my family and I used to go there, but many of the Pakistanis in this crowd here went there too. And why did I change the name Natya Gali to Hawa Gali? And Natya Gali is set about 8,000 feet above sea level, and the Himalayas and the Hindu Kush and the Karakoram go up to 32. So it's only 1/3 of the mountains. And so when people talk about San Gabriel being mountains, I'm like, when you don't see the top of a mountain range, that's a mountain range, you know, and that's how it was in Natya Gali, because that was the cool part of the mountains. That was the part where when the British were colonizing South Asia, they had built these, what they called hill stations, all through northern Pakistan, northern India, Bangladesh. So they could go get relief from the heat, because it does get hot in the summer. You know, the cities get really hot. The mainland, the land gets really hot. So, but Natya Gali is magical and mystical with this mist that floats through, and is during the monsoon, so there is rain, and it was very present in my childhood. It's a place that we went to, and I don't know why I made it Hawa Gali. Hawa means air. Air street. Gali means street, so air street, not Natya Gali. What does Natya mean? My mother's here, so I can ask her that.
May have to do something with some kind of nose ring or something.
Natya. I never thought about that.
Right.
But I just didn't want to place it, I guess. I wanted to make because it's so, it's set in so much mystery. I wanted to have the setting be mysterious, I think.
Yeah.
You know?
The novel is also, you know, about these two women and their relationship, and really, you know, kind of healing and, you know, kind of confronting each other, not in the classic way of South Asian women and mothers and daughters, not confronting each other for much of the novel, but really, you know, healing through these various ways of cooking for each other and taking care of children, and you know, and kind of these moments of asking for help. And I thought it was, again, because these women are not conventional, it wasn't a story about, you know, Laila coming and being upset about Yasmeen's divorce in any kind of way, or shunning her, but really, you know, trying to reach across this void of trauma, and you know, trying to kind of support each other and get to the bottom of that. And I thought that was really lovely. And, you know, was it something that also, since, you know, all of these stories were kind of coming, was that something that really, to me, became the arc or the heart of the story? And, you know,
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
And I don't know what drove that, you know? It was just something, I mean, I think it had to do with my own break, I suppose, from Pakistan, because I left. I didn't leave to leave. I just went to college, and then I ended up going to grad school and meeting my husband and getting married, and then suddenly I was here and living here. And then there was a little period where I didn't go home. So I had that break, and I know what that break felt like. And for me, it wasn't as deliberate as it was for Yasmeen, nor was it that long. I think there was a 5-year stretch where I didn't go. But that was like a part of me was being, just killed, So it's important. Place is important.
I'll ask one more question, then we'll open it up. As you said, you're a writer of many forms: essays, poetry, novel, and I know you're, a deep arts organizer. What are you working on now, and how do you kind of, do you have a favorite of all of these forms, or do you kind of move between them?
I identify as a writer, and I am in the process of finishing my memoir, which is called On Belonging. And I've been doing a lot of interviews and talking a lot about my work, and I do recognize that a lot of my work is about borders. It's about breaks and migration and movement, whether it's poetry, whether it's essays, whether it's my parents were born in India. They migrated to Pakistan after partition. And now my mother is in the process of kind of being in the US, but kind of not. And she married outside our community, her community, to marry my father, just as I did. So there are many parallels. So the work that I create has to do with breaks and shifts and partition in some way, partition 1947. But that is a really important piece of the work that I create. It doesn't go away.
Great. I think we have time to open it up for some questions.
Yes.
So there's something really poetic about Ratia Gali. Gali in the local sort of sense means the valley. And Ratia is a derivation of the word for Lord.
Oh.
Nath.
That's what you were saying, yeah.
So Rashi meant, well, it's also
Yeah,
jewelry,
yeah.
Ratia Gali is also, I think changing it to Hawa Gali is demoting the
Well, I just
And
elevated
that's
it.
what you get to do when you write a novel.
I elevated it by putting it in a book.
Interesting.
Thank you.
Other questions?
And you asked me what's my most favorite in poetry, essays, fiction. It's a hard call. I think fiction I still love, but I am compelled by nonfiction. Poetry I do when I have something really important to say. I don't sit down and say I want to write a poem. A poem just comes when it's ready to come. So.
Interesting.
Yes, Vicky.
Do you write primarily in English, or do you mix languages?
That's a good question, and it's a question that's a loaded question because I went to British school in Pakistan, so we studied English as a subject, and Urdu was a language we spoke at home, and we studied it as a subject at school. So, and then I went to college in the U.S. So my education has always been in English, and my writing has always been in English. And when I went back home after graduating, I was really angry, and I said I wasn't going to write anymore unless I was going to write in Urdu. You know?
Was the book published in Urdu?
No, never. I'm hoping somebody will translate it. Don't know who I'm thinking about, but she might be wearing white today.
Amazing.
But no, it has not been published in Urdu.
Do you find that?
And I have written poems in Urdu, but not long text.
Yeah, I was like saying, do you find it ever, that's interesting. How is it to write poems in Urdu?
I love it. I really do love it. I don't do it every day, but I don't write poetry every day either, So at some point I'll have a collection. But I'm really focusing on the memoir right now to finish that. So it's one thing at a time. Yeah, there was something in there that you had asked.
Other questions?
Eileen.
I'm looking forward to reading the book. I haven't read it yet, but I was following your blog series called Where is Home?
Oh, yeah.
And I wondered if you could speak about that, and might that be a book project too? Because it was so thoughtful and interesting. And
Oh, thank you.
that thread of home is a constant.
Yes, exactly. So, yes. So the project was called What is Home, and I had received funding from Mid-America Arts Organization through an Artist Innovation Grant to do a larger project. And I was working on What is Home as a memoir, which has now become On Belonging. So it is a continuous project, but part of the award that I received was that I said that I would do this blog. So I interviewed, no matter where I was, whether I was in Pakistan or in Houston or wherever I visited. And I went to Delhi, New Delhi in between too, so I interviewed a ton of people in Delhi. And it was the question that I asked. And I had a standard question, 3 questions that I would ask, and then I would just notate them and take a picture. So that's on my blog. So you can find it on my blog, yeah. So you were following it back then, or you recently? Oh, wow, yeah. And that project, simultaneously I was doing workshops with documented and undocumented South Asian women in Houston, and then I was doing a workshop with refugee youth who had been pushed out of Bhutan and were Nepali in origin and lived in refugee camps in Nepal. So all of this was part of a project, and then it all culminated in a performance that I did in Houston. Yeah, so all that is on my website and my blog.
Oh,
yeah.
Amazing.
So I do a lot of stuff using text that I create that I'm already working on, and On Belonging is where a lot of the performance text is coming from right now, which is what I did for What is Home. And I use a lot of fabrics. I use textiles. I'm really affected by cloth. For some of you who saw me earlier, I was wearing a cotton sari that I bought in Dhaka because I love fabric and I love saris and I love, So I had been I had chosen to work in a community center in Houston, but the room was really ugly. And so I had brought all my saris, and not all my saris, but a ton of saris. And those pictures are up also, but I had hung them with a friend. I had hung them like long because it was a very tall room. I guess it was about this length, but there was a pole, and so they were hanging on one side. And then I had brought carpets and cushions from my house, and I read chapters, but it was an interactive process where I would ask certain questions of the audience, and then one audience member would go pick up a chapter, and then I would read it. So, kind of a vignette of what it was. It was not. It was intense. It was very intense. But the text comes from the manuscript that is now On Belonging, and I did another performance using that text in Houston at the Menil Collection, which is an amazing museum, and I have an installation. So I think I'm working on a process where I think I'm going to bring that project to Los Angeles. So I'll keep you guys posted on that, where I do that installation and performance.
Awesome.
Yes.
When you're writing, you try to maintain an environment around you so that you can get that emotional depth. And if you do that, what kind of environment do you generally try to set around yourself to bring that kind of emotional depth in your work? I'm sure it can't come on a busy street. I mean, maybe for some, but
It depends on which place you are in your writing, or rather for me, it depends on where I am in my writing. If I haven't written for a while, if I've just, like right now, I'm doing so much more marketing and reading and touring and all of that, so I'm not writing. So when I get back to writing, I have to be in my study, and I have to be home alone, and I have to have the house be quiet, and I need that. But there are times when I'm really deep in my manuscript, in my writing project, where I can just go in a cafe and write, and I can be anywhere, because then I'm just immersed. But it's kind of like going into a pool of cold water, right? You have to go slowly, and then once you're in, you love it, But you gotta go in slowly. So that's how it is for me. I need my quiet space. I need my study, and I have a study, thank goodness. But when I'm in my work, I can take my laptop and sit anywhere.
Was it difficult to move from Houston and here and get back into practice?
Actually, it was much easier, in the sense that in Houston, I was doing so much. I had my nonprofit organization. I was serving on many boards. I was doing radio. I was teaching. Name it, I was doing it. So when I came to Los Angeles, I came because my husband got a job here, and I didn't know anybody. Not many people anyway, and I didn't really have a job to report to. I had writing deadlines, and I only had to report to myself, which writing is a lonely process, right? You show up, and there's nobody waiting on the other side saying, come on, do it. So in that sense, it was much easier, because what else was I going to do after my daughter went to school and my husband went to work?
Nice. All right. Thank you so much for everything. Big thank you to Skylight, and please buy the book. So she will be signing right here.
Yes, I will be signing.
You've been listening to the Skylight Books author reading series. Don't forget, you can listen to this and all of our other great podcasts at skylightbooks.com. Thanks again for stopping by, and we hope to see you soon.